So, a interesting article by a guy called, what's his name again? Hang on. Professor Nicholas Boyle. And the article goes, the problem with the English don't want to be just another member of a team. And I think he hits a very good nail on the head. Now, I was going to read it, but it's quite a lengthy read. But I'll leave a link to it down below so you can go read it to yourself. But I'll just essentially summarise. So, he starts off basically like this. The English as an identity hasn't really existed for about 300 years. And that is because we had the political union with Scotland in 1700s and the one with sort of Ireland in the 1800s. So since then, the English have, as an identity, have been British, not English. And he makes this very clear that during the Empire, the English were the predominant partners in this new unity. And it's that the Scottish, the Welsh and Irish were all British, but these were just the funny colloquial areas of the UK and weren't the dominant partner. Now, we've seen in recent times that we've had a Welsh Assembly and a Scottish Assembly and there's a Northern Irish Assembly. However, there hasn't been a, shall we say, English Assembly. And most of the arguments for this have been, oh, we want to stop the UK taxpayer from having to pay for another layer of, politicians. But that's effectively what we are doing for Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland with having their own parliaments. So he argues that there is, if we did have a loss of, and did this, made an English parliament, then he argues that the English might actually have a reason to have an identity again and might be at least be comfortable with having an identity and re-embracing what it means to be English rather than British, because it's something that we haven't had for about 300 years, as I said before. Now, he also makes another quite interesting argument, and that is, why did the UK specifically vote for Brexit when you had, Scotland and particularly Ireland heavily vote for to remain in the European Union? I mean, it makes an interesting example because, there are elites in, Belfast and Edinburgh, and you could also make the case that a lot of leavers make, well, it was because the people were left behind by globalism. Well, weren't the people left behind by globalism in Scotland and Northern Ireland? And I'd argue that a lot of these, resistance to the EU is somehow a fear that we are going to lose what makes us, English. And in fact, he argues the exact same thing in the article, that if the UK were to remain, that the English would then lose their case of Britishness and that of superiority. Now, if you don't believe me, go look at what people like Boris Johnson has been saying, and everyone else has been saying, that somehow the UK can punch well above its weight when it's just an island. People are trying to take us back to a time when we had this globe-spanning empire and when we could just force people to make trade agreements with us because they were our colonial lessers. We could just say, right, this is what's happening now, and they wouldn't have a say in it. And if there were another nation that, say, didn't want to have a trade agreement with us or demanding that, this is how it's going to be, then we'd involve in something called gunboat diplomacy, which pretty much involved of sailing a couple of battleships up to as close as their capital as possible, or main city, or a big port, and basically said, yeah, you're going to agree to our demands or else. And it's this whole thing of, we aren't as powerful as we used to be, and a lot of people just can't seem to admit that. They can't admit that we don't have an empire anymore, and that's what made us so strong and powerful. And that over the years that we are now just this, island nation, we are a lesser player in the world, and there's nothing wrong with that. And our big, position should always be, has been, I agree with Margaret Thatcher here on this, that the UK's position in the world is, to be a pillar between Europe and the US. And that our position in the world is to be part of the European Union. Indeed, one of the leaders, I would keep on reminding people that we referred to as one of the big three. We had a lot of power and sway. Now, when we leave the European Union, we lose that sway. But, people don't seem to understand that at the moment. And I think it's because, as he rightly points out in his article, that there is a loss of sort of identity, and that people were constantly afraid of, oh no, we're going to lose our identity. We weren't in any fear of losing identity whatsoever. In fact, he argues that what should happen is that the English should finally gain their own parliament and, finally get, English laws for English MP, and, the Scots and Welsh and, Northern Irish shouldn't have a vote on what happens in, English, counties. But then this itself would then, the English then would have to admit that we share this island with the Welsh, with the Scottish, and there is Northern Ireland, not part of this island technically, but they are part of the United Kingdom, and we're going to have to admit that we are all equals and that we share all responsibility, and that if you do want to embrace a British heritage, that you are not the superior partner in this relationship anymore, that we are all equals. And I argue that that's what we should be currently embracing, that we are a British nation made up of these distinct identities and cultures, and that we should embrace not only our local ones, so Scottish, Welsh, whatever, but we should also embrace being British as well, knowing that, together we can achieve more. And I think that is what people don't want to see. And that they were scared that, you look at a lot of the talks against immigrants. Oh, they're coming over here, they're, taking our culture. There is not a worry about losing English culture. Don't worry, it's never going to go away. So I think he's right, summing up on this, that there is no worry about losing a English identity. Us being a member of the EU doesn't lessen that to any extent. In fact, you can go and see the rest of the EU all the time. There is a very distinct French personality, German, Holland, Dutch, Luxembourg. You'll see it all over. This, just because they are members of the EU, doesn't mean this has gone away from them. And what they've done is they've embraced a new idea that they can be European and Dutch, or European and French, or European and Italian, or European and Spanish. And we need to sort of embrace that idea as well, because quite evidently Northern Ireland and Scotland were quite happy to embrace that idea as well. So what do you think to this idea that was being proposed in this article? Do you think that there has been a loss of, shall we say, English identity, and almost a loss or bewilderment at the loss of a British identity, with the English being the partner superior in that national identity? Let me know what you think.